Hey guys, we are here to talk about the second episode of The Walking Dead Season 7 called The Well. Full spoilers follow. There's a guy, there's a tiger. We're going to talk all about that.
All hail the king!
That's right. So if you're still with us, you're okay with spoilers. Big swerve here. Big swerve after that premiere.
You know that scene when Carol gets rolled down in the auditorium and she's sitting in front of Ezekiel and his tiger, Shiva, and she just starts laughing and she's like, I don't know what's going on in the most delightful way.
Right,
that,
right.
I feel like, embodied everyone watching it at that point, because you're right, it is such a big tonal swerve from the very, very hopeless season premiere, but I think much needed in the same way.
I agree. I wasn't here last week to talk about how much I disliked the season premiere. Bring it.
Everyone was in such agreement, and really just polite about things.
That's right. But as someone who did not like the season premiere, yeah, it was, no matter what, it was going to be just like, whoa, this is something different, but I do think necessary. Whenever they go into stuff from the comics that is, for lack of a better term, more comic booky, it's interesting to see how they handle it, because the show is much more grounded and has even a more grim tone. Not that the comics aren't grim too, but something like the governor, they did tone him down. He wasn't the comic book governor who was much more of a big, broad character. Ezekiel, though, they were like, we gotta go with it. You know, it's a guy with the tiger.
I think they leaned more into it, even. I went back and I sort of did a comparison between Ezekiel's introduction in the comics and his introduction in the show, and it's a much more dramatic situation. It's Rick and Jesus coming to him instead of Carol and Morgan, and they're coming to ask for help, whereas this is like, hi, introduction, we're here with you because you saved us. And I think they leaned a lot more into the character of Ezekiel, as in the character that he's putting on, which is so bizarre, and you're watching it and you're like, oh, this is a comic book show, and it's sort of hard to chew on, and I think they were right to end it with him coming clean to Carol about who he is. They couldn't have waited more than one episode.
I think that's very necessary. I mean, and in fact, he was much more direct than he even is in the comics, you know, about laying all his cards on the table and really owning up to it all being a facade. But I do think you needed that, because on this TV show, otherwise, if they say they waited for weeks, people are like, what the hell is this? Like, how is this happening?
I do love that there's a group of people who are essentially just LARPing in the post-zombie apocalypse.
Right. But, you know, again, because, look, we talked before about Walking Dead has a pattern and there's certain sort of set things. And on one hand, this is just another safe haven that could all go to hell very easily. But because it's the most extreme and out there one, it does make it different. It makes it interesting. And to see people that, yeah, maybe in such a bleak world would look for something just completely, that, you know, the idea that they kind of all know that it's BS, but they're like, let's just kind of go with it.
Well, I think it's interesting because there were many a think piece written about the season premiere.
You don't say.
And why, even if you liked it, some people did not like it. I think we can all diplomatically agree about that. But it was a very hopeless episode. It was an episode where Negan intentionally is trying to beat the hope out of Rick, the hope that he can be, that Negan can be overcome. Because of that, it's hard as a viewer. You're like, what is there to look forward to? Like, this is a very hopeless future. So I think that The Well was one of the most hopeful episodes, one of the lightest episodes, certainly, that the show has ever done. And even, I mean, it's not necessarily like incredibly subtle, but there was a certain subtlety to Ezekiel's rebellion against Negan and the Saviors in this episode that I think is important, because you can see that there is a small way to rebel even if you're not taking down these villains, and you can see the seeds of that, and maybe that's setting up what's to come later this season.
Yeah, it was really cool to kind of understand what the hell was going on with the pigs as the episode progressed.
Why are they feeding them?
Why are they feeding zombies to pigs? And then understanding that that what they're trying to do and sort of take down the Saviors from in that way, perhaps. I really like that. You know, we should go back to the very beginning and just talk about that. I was worried about this episode because at the very beginning it reminded us of something I did not like last season, which was Sad Carol and her having seeing the real people being killed as zombies were being killed, which I'm like, come on, it's been 7 years. Yes, they were once real people, Carol, but get a grip. But then the rest of the episode kind of just got to be more the Carol we know, you know, doing the Carol thing.
I love the
facade,
fake Carol character, too. She can just slip right into it, and it's really funny to see that and see Morgan responding to seeing her in that character as well, when he's sort of aware that she's putting on this face for Ezekiel, and I'm sure he is imagining, oh, what's the conversation we're going to have after this?
Right, and that's what's great about the end too, is that because Ezekiel calls her out on it, so he's like, hey, look, I'm completely faking this, which you knew, but I also know you're faking what you're doing too. And so they got to have like an interesting rapport there. And I really like, that weirdness with Carol aside at the end of last season, I think Carol's been one of the show's best, sort of most interesting characters.
She's my favorite character.
So it's, this is a fun, which is a surprising word to use on Walking Dead, but it's a fun new sort of place to put her into at this point.
And I also do want to mention, I think it's really important that these two characters weren't there for the trauma that did happen with Negan, which I'm assuming probably happened pretty concurrently with this episode. I'm very interested to see how, I'm assuming it will be them who eventually bring Rick and the Alexandrians to Ezekiel.
Right.
Maybe it'll be Jesus like in the Hilltop Gang like in the comics. But if it is, these two characters who haven't been broken in the same way as Rick and Sasha and Maggie and Carl and everyone else there, and they do still have a little bit of that rebellious spirit in them, how will that affect the rest of their group? Will it help sort of lift them up and make them ready for another confrontation, or are they just gonna get sucked back into, oh well, Negan is unbeatable, maybe we should really make sure we're ready to fight him this time?
I was slightly distracted because I was just thinking about how Jesus and the Hilltop Gang would be a great band name.
Well, maybe they're gonna be, maybe that's the guitarist at Kingdom we didn't get to see.
It's all gonna come together. So we really liked this episode coming off of the much debated premiere. What did you think and about the big tonal shift here and this new direction for The Walking Dead? Do you think it works in the world of The Walking Dead? Let us know in the comments. You can read Matt Fowler's full review at IGN.com, and for plenty more on The Walking Dead, keep it here at IGN.